Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and for those of us in the room for braving the elements to come out today. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm the director of the Leonard Transportation Center, and welcome to our first dialogue for 2024. We're really excited to have this topic. It's going to be great. I've seen the presentations. I'm excited to hear from all of our speakers. It's going to be a really interesting presentation today as we hear from the federal government, a regional agency, and students from Cal State San Bernardino talking about the important topic of transit safety. It's one of the main issues today that's talked a lot in the transit world to figure out how to get ridership back up and going. And so we're going to hear all about it. So I'm excited because I'm going to learn a lot. Great. All right. So I'd like to get us started, invite up the Dean of the Jack Brown College of Cal State San Bernardino to give a few welcome words.
Thank you, Professor Collins, and thank you all for being here in the rain, and thank you all of you who are connecting online. A very special thanks to Erin Rogers for hosting us here at Omnitrans and all our colleagues here. You are always a great partner, and thank you for your hospitality. And I really look forward to the content of today's presentations. And I have to apologize because there was a situation that I need to take care of, so I have to leave early. But we have Jean Ruevano from the Department of Homeland Security. I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say. And we have some of our own students who have been working with Professor Nerea Martiache-Solans from CSUSB, Isabel Cervantes, Lorraine Lopez, and Raquel Guerrero. I'm really looking forward to the work they have been doing. And Professor Collins was saying that this is the first meeting of the first dialogue of 2024. It takes a lot of work to prepare each one of these. So thank you to the Planning Committee, Erin Rogers from Omnitrans, Doran Barnes from Foothill Transit, Josh Landis from Foothill Transit also, Kenny Birchman from San Bernardino Valley College, Carrie Witt from HNTB, Matt Bushman from HNTB, Michelle Casey from the San Bernardino International Airport, and Otis Greer from SBCTA. And also a big thanks to the sponsors of these programs. It takes resources to create them. Our platinum sponsors are HNTB, the Ontario International Airport, San Bernardino International Airport, and San Bernardino Valley College. Our gold sponsors are Omnitrans, SoCalGas, U.S. National Science Foundation, and Woodruff and Smart. And our silver sponsors are EXP, Foothill Transit, Global Leadership Alliance, Lane Metrolink, Sarusa Engineering, and Theodora Oringer. Thank you all for making it possible. And since you are not here to listen to me, but to listen to our speakers, thank you all for being here, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez Arrayas, our dean. So then I'd like to welcome up Matt Bushman, who's actually online, one of our major sponsors and partners in this from HNTB. Matt, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to really just proud to sponsor, founding sponsor of the Leonard Transportation Center. We want to congratulate Kimberly and her team, everything they've accomplished these past 6 to 7 years. As you mentioned, my name is Matt Bushman, Group Director for HNTB. We're a transportation engineering firm, and I'm responsible for the office right here in Ontario, where we do everything kind of from planning through construction management on local projects. And so we're looking forward to this first dialogue in 2024 and everything we have yet to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for being such a great partner on these events. Okay, so for those of you who have attended the dialogues before, you might know that we start with a poll question to get you all thinking about, because these are really dialogues. We want people to engage, to take away, to learn, and to use the information in their everyday lives. So Our first question is, to what extent should the federal government, the TSA, bringing up our first speaker for today, be involved in improving the safety and security of surface transportation in the Inland Empire? And our small scale here, very involved, moderately involved, limited to funding and resources, not involved. It should really be from the local jurisdiction only. And again, we would do call these dialogues because we're hoping for conversations. So if you have questions, please write them down. We're hoping to have a very lively conversation today with our students and with, representatives from our federal government and our regional governments from Foothill Transit about this important issue. My goodness. Very involved at 65%. So that's good news, Jean. Good news on your presentation. You have a very friendly audience here. So come aboard. Again, I'm very happy to announce or to present our first speaker, Jean Luvano from the Department of Homeland Security, specifically from TSA. Thank you, Jean.
Good morning. My name is Jean Luvano. I'm an inspector with the Transportation Security Administration, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Let me there we go. All right, awesome. So just a couple things real quick, just to kind of lay the groundwork here for where we're going. So we had the events of 9/11, which resulted in the creation of TSA at the end of 2001. At that time, TSA was a part of the Department of Transportation. Shortly the next year, the Department of Homeland Security was created, which brought over 22 agencies into DHS, TSA, the Secret Service, Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, Homeland Security investigations, a myriad of agencies. So TSA and aviation security, that's what we're known for. I mean, you go to the airport, the folks in the blue shirts asking you to take your laptops out of your bag or your shoes off. That is not me. That's not what I'm involved with. In response to the train bombings in Madrid in 2004, then subsequently the attack on London's metro system in 2005, the U.S. Congress allocated resources to TSA to create, at that time, a rail security operation within TSA. And there was 100 inspectors allocated at that point, and I was one of those 100 back in 2005. We're now up to about 220 nationwide, give or take. And so our focus is on not just at that time was which passenger rail security, but now all surface transportation. So passenger and freight rail, some aspects of maritime, pipelines, school buses, mass transit agencies. So basically anything that doesn't fly, we are involved in some way with security efforts with those entities. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of these slides quickly here in the West Coast region. So our office based here out of Los Angeles covers the majority of Southern California minus San Diego and Imperial County. So all the way up from San Luis Obispo County south, but we also cover the state of Hawaii and the U.S. territories in Guam, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. So our focus is primarily in two areas as surface inspectors. There is a regular, and I'm going to talk in general terms, but then specifically to mass transit as well. There is a regulatory component to our job. So I do enforce federal security regulations. Up until recently, there were no federal security regulations that affected mass transit in any way. However, a couple of years ago, there were the first set of security regulations that now started affecting mass transit. For bus-only systems in designated high-threat urban areas, they're required to have a 24/7 point of contact for TSA for the transmittal of security information back and forth. They're required to notify TSA, our 24/7 Operations Center in Washington, D.C., in the event of some type of significant security concern. And they're also required to provide security awareness training to employees that are in designated security sensitive positions. So that would be like coach operators, dispatchers, maintenance personnel. And so there are some cybersecurity regulations in effect. The bulk of the time that we spend with mass transit is performing voluntary security improvement activities. So voluntary on the part of the mass transit provider engaging with TSA. So that's going to include a variety of assessments and training and then exercises. Those are the three main categories. So we'll kind of go through here. So one of the trainings that we provide primarily is called First Observer Plus. And that is a security awareness training for frontline employees on observing, assessing, and reporting. So being aware of their environment, that's the observe part. So there's no better expert on, for example, here we're at Omnitrans today, which is one of my entities that I'm the TSA point of contact for. So we've done this training here at Omnitrans. So there's no better expert on Omnitrans operations than the employees that work here day in and day out, whether it's in the back in the maintenance shops or out on the street operating buses. So they're aware of their environment. They're aware of what's normal, what's not normal. So when things are not feeling normal, they're feeling suspicious. Well, what does that mean? So then we kind of train to the assess part. How is this something different from just an odd event versus suspicious? And then the report part. If it is suspicious, then to let somebody know. This kind of follows alongside with the see something, say something that you kind of hear frequently when you're out in public at the airport at different events. So that this training can be provided in person, but TSA also has a streaming option. We have training. This training is available through our YouTube channel by different kinds of modes too. There could be freight rail, school bus operators, mass transit. So yeah, we have a variety of versions of this First Observer Plus training that's available. At the end, the employee can get a certificate of completion that they can provide their employer as a training record. CETA, and I do joke that as a federal employee, I get a quarter every time I mention an acronym. So we're really good at acronyms. So CETA is Security Enhancement Through Assessment. And so basically what we're doing is partnering with an entity to evaluate some aspect of their security program. Frequently with mass transit, what we're evaluating is the thoroughness of a pre-trip inspection. So before the bus operator departs a yard with their vehicle, they're going to do a pre-trip inspection. Transit is very excellent at safety, but safety and security are separate, related, but separate things. So as they're going around their vehicle, looking, make sure the headlights work, the turn signals work, that the tires look normal. There's from operationally the vehicle is ready to perform normally mechanically. But we're also asking the agencies to have their drivers look through a security lens at their vehicle. So is there anything unusual about the vehicle? Is it a hatch that's normally locked, unlocked? Are there visible signs of like pry marks from a tool in an area that there shouldn't be? Is there something duct taped to the vehicle? Obviously, the fine maintenance folks in the back are not going to put a vehicle out on the street with some box duct taped to the side of it, for example. So in what we do with this CETA is that we might leave like a backpack or a duffel bag under a seat in the back of the bus, because the coach operators are supposed to walk the length of the bus before they start revenue service. And so do they detect this bag? And so as they're leaving the yard, we'll stop the bus and have a brief conversation with the driver to see if the item was detected or not. This is a 3-step process. So we come out and do an initial evaluation. How thorough was the pre-trip inspection? So of the 20 bags that we left out there, how many were detected? We then come back and provide training. So it might be that First Observer Plus training we talked about. It might be some of the agencies are using that training already as part of to meet the needs of the TSA regulatory requirements. So we might come out and do something more advanced, like for example, in the late 1990s in the UK, the British Transport Police developed this protocol called HOT, hidden, obvious, and typical. They were getting so many reports of suspicious items at their transit stations due to the IRA bombings that were going on. So the public was hyper vigilant, hyper alert to anything that was left behind. And the British Transport Police there was just delays and police responses to a lunch bag or a jacket. They had to develop this protocol to determine if this item was intentionally hidden, was it obviously suspicious, or was it typical for the environment? And so based on that protocols, that kind of helped determine, was this item suspicious or not? So we'll teach that in the phase 2 training here for CETA. And then phase 3 is coming back and doing the assessment again, putting the bags back on the vehicles and then seeing what's the detection rate. Now that we've gone through training, there's been some reinforcement of the pre-trip inspection policies by the agency. What's the detection rate now? And it's usually quite an improvement. As far as now exercises, there's a variety of exercises. So when you have your plans and policies in place, and that's been implemented through your agency, folks know what they're supposed to do in the event of a bomb threat or an active shooter event. You want to evaluate that policy or that practice, or procedure, your plan. And that's initially done through a tabletop exercise. So we have I-STEP, which is a series of TSA exercises that can kind of help an owner operator, an agency with evaluating their plans. So whether it's a tabletop exercise or a facilitated discussion where we can kind of come in and let's say it's hard to pull people out of the operation. It's hard for me to get the director of operations and the IT director and the CEO out of an operation an entire day or even a half day. So can we pull them out of an operation for an hour or two? And then maybe we're going to game 2 scenarios. We might game a cybersecurity attack on the network for that transit agency, or some type of active assailant scenario, or a bomb at a transit center or something like that, bomb threat or an actual, that we're going to talk through that. And how does the agency's current plans and policies and procedures and training, how does that hold up through this scenario? And then we do have then, so you kind of then move on, then you kind of go to, some functional exercises and then full scale exercises. Maybe we're now getting involved, the local SWAT teams and fire, and they're bringing out all their toys to go and deal with the scenario. So there's a sequence of exercises that and training that TSA can provide. I see on the second bullet point here, cyber 5 and 5. Cybersecurity is obviously hugely important currently, and the Cyber 5 and 5 are regional workshops that we offer a few times throughout the year, and talks about 5 non-technical measures that you can take in 5 days to improve your agency's cybersecurity posture. Now we also have this system called Axis. That's, if anybody's keeping track, I think I got like 2 or 3 quarters down at this point. So exercise information system. So this is a portal that TSA can make available to our transit partners, where you can, if you want to craft your own tabletop exercise or facilitated discussion, you can get onto this portal and say, okay, well, we want to do a cybersecurity related exercise, or one of the other calamities that might come upon a transit agency. There's 800 different types of exercises within this system. Maybe you want to do one that's collaborative, like with another transit agency. So here we have the San Bernardino Transit Center, not too far away from where we're standing. So we'll have Omnitrans, Riverside Transit, multiple smaller municipal transit agencies, also then co-located with Metrolink, and 2 lines of service, one going out to Redlands, one going towards downtown LA. So we might want to develop some type of discussion where we're going to invite some partners in and make sure that our plans sync up with their plans if we were to have a bomb threat at a multimodal transit center, for example. So the Axis is scalable, and again, you select the type of exercise that you would want to go through. Now, as far as assessments, we offer 2 assessments. So one we've been doing quite a long time, the baseline assessment for security enhancement. And that's a review of 17 security action items that were developed in conjunction with TSA and the Federal Transit Administration that cover what are an agency's security and emergency preparedness policies and procedures. There's a few physical security items in there too. But, so for example, does your agency have a security program? Is it fully approved and implemented? Is it signed off by the agency senior leadership? When was the last time you had an exercise with your local first responders? Do you provide security training or emergency preparedness training to your frontline employees, or do you provide recurrent security training to your employees? A new one that we started offering just recently is the cybersecurity base or SCI base, and that goes over aspects of the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology cybersecurity framework. And so again, that's looking at things from a policy and procedure perspective. Is there a cybersecurity plan for that agency that's been fully implemented? But looking at the 5 aspects of the cybersecurity framework in place by that agency. I will mention one thing that's coming online here very shortly is a vulnerability assessment for mass transit. So TSA, I'd say later this year into the early part of 25, will now start offering also a physical security vulnerability assessment. So that's a brand new thing. And all of these assessments, everything, every program, every training, every aspect I've just talked about and we'll be talking about during this presentation are free of charge to mass transit agencies. The cost is in labor. It's in the time to pull these employees out of the operation and participate with us. Now, CSET is a cybersecurity evaluation tool. It was created in conjunction, again, with our partner agency, CISA. And let me just kind of as a quick aside. So I mentioned back in 2001 when TSA was first created, we were the Department of Transportation. We were part of the Department of Transportation. Then when DHS was created, we went there. Now there's a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Transportation and DHS that DOT agencies like FTA, the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA, they're the leads on safety issues. So if there's a derailment that happens, and that's purely accidental, a safety issue, a safety-related issue, that's going to be handled by the Federal Railroad Administration. Or if there's some type of safety-related incident in transit, FTA. DHS entities like TSA, like CISA, we are the security side of the house. So if there's a security-related incident, if there's security training that needs to get done, that's going to be handled by agencies within the Department of Homeland Security. So now within that, especially within DHS, we try to partner up quite a bit. So CISA, CISA, again, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they are the lead agency for the U.S. government in dealing with cybersecurity outside of DoD, Department of Defense networks. So whether it's the financial sector, transit, electrical grid, any of this critical infrastructure, CISA has the lead on cybersecurity incident response and mitigation. TSA's partnership with them. So within Surface, we also now have specific cybersecurity inspectors within Surface operations within TSA. They are responsible for left of incident. So before an incident happens, our cybersecurity inspectors help provide training and assessments. They try to increase an entity's cybersecurity capabilities, awareness, training, posture, the defenses ahead of an incident. When an incident happens, we then kind of defer that incident response and then the mitigation of that incident to our partners at CISA. And I'll mention this one last thing because it's not on the slides, but we're talking about DHS partnerships. Omnitrans specifically had a request from their board of directors for human trafficking training. They wanted their employees to be aware of characteristics of human trafficking. They really wanted that to be trained. Omnitrans reached out to me. Hey, is that something you guys have available? And that's not something TSA is directly involved in. However, my partner agency at Homeland Security Investigations, who's the lead on human trafficking within DHS or for the U.S. government, they have an office just down the road, and they provided 6 training sessions to Omnitrans employees, and then also to the community and other regional transit operators. So it was a great collaboration. So I think that's maybe another asset that TSA can provide, is that if we don't have the resource, we can reach out to partner agencies like CISA or HSI to then deliver the resource that transit agency is looking for. So let's, okay, so we do have some paper resources that we can provide. These are guidebooks, variety of modes, mass transit, cybersecurity, cybersecurity resources, like I mentioned, the CSET, and then additional resources too. So especially for those folks that have been designated point of contacts, whether it's security point of contact or cybersecurity point of contact at TSA, we have regular phone calls, conferences, intelligence information that we send out to those points of contacts. At a place like a multimodal transit center, TSA's Federal Air Marshal Service has what's called Viper teams, and it's Visible Intermodal Protection and Response. That's another quarter, VIPR. And they can get out into the environment, show the flag, hey, we're here. They'll work with local law enforcement at a particular venue. We do have K9 available too for those type of operations. And special event planning. I do want to make note of this because it will affect this region too. So a couple years ago when the Super Bowl was here in Los Angeles, we were involved in helping with some of the security planning and training of the coach operators that were going to be servicing the event. Not as much at the time as I would have liked, because we're kind of coming out of that COVID time period. This was like COVID's last grasp, I think, before things started really getting relaxed. And so there was still a lot of restrictions from the NFL and LA County on in-person training and contact. So we had to do a lot of stuff through streaming and like what we're doing today, kind of this hybrid offering. So, but we were involved in that, and we're already starting to get involved in the planning for the upcoming Summer Olympics here in Los Angeles in 2028. The thing that I mentioned this is just because the organizers of LA 28 intend for that Olympics to be a carless Olympics, which means as a spectator, this fan, I'm a huge fan of the Olympics. I have been since I was a kid. But you will not be able to drive to the event venue. You will be driving or taking some type of transit to a park and ride, and then there'll be a shuttle service that then takes you to the event. How that's going to impact transit, how that's going to impact school buses that maybe are sitting idle during the summer months of the Summer Olympics, we'll see. That's a lot of planning. We've got 5 years to get ready. But I do mention that because there will be an impact on mass transit, because the amount of buses that are going to be required to service all these venues that go all the way from Lake Paris out to the San Fernando Valley, out to Santa Monica and Long Beach, downtown LA, San Dimas. The event spread is about a 50-60 mile spread between events, lasting between the Olympics and Paralympics, about 5 weeks of competition. So massive event. I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as we get closer. That's the end of it. I'll leave my contact information here. Thanks for giving me a couple extra minutes. I appreciate that. I don't know if we're doing questions or not, but that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, lots of great information. And you're right, Gene. Lots of acronyms. It's quite the what is the alphabet soup out there, and trying to figure out all these things. So thanks for coming, and thanks for really describing a lot of the activities that many of us don't know are actually even occurring. So it's great to hear it. Before we bring up our next speaker, we'll have our next poll question. And our next speaker is John Connolly from Foothill Transit, who is kind enough to bring us Gene to our forum today, but also really Foothill Transit has been such a great supporter of the dialogues. We're happy to have John here. And our poll question before bringing John up is, what do you perceive as the biggest threat for safety and security on surface transportation? So violence on buses and trains, harassment, drug usage and smuggling, or cyber breaches? We should have had all of the above there as well, but we don't. 50% violence, so just the general kind of violence that's out there. And then cyber breaches at 22%, and then we have the others around 17% and such. Yeah. And drug smuggling, drug usage and smuggling at 11%. So nice little mix. See. Okay, and now I'd like to invite up, he's online for us, John Connolly, who's Chief of Safety and Security at Foothill Transit. John, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. Good morning. First off, I want to thank Dr. Collins and her entire team for inviting me to have the opportunity to discuss this great topic, which, by the way, I applaud Cal State San Bernardino and the Leonard Transportation Center for actually picking this topic. I think it's imperative. I don't think we talk about it enough in settings like this. So kudos to you. I also want to thank Dr. Neria and her students. Josh Landis and I from Foothill Transit have had the opportunity with members from Omnitrans to participate in her classes. So I really applaud the students that are here today, and I've learned a lot from them. So looking forward to doing the same today. Okay, so a little bit about Foothill Transit. You know, in addition to what you're seeing on the screen, our mission statement is to be the premier public transit provider committed to 6 values: safety, courtesy, quality, responsiveness, efficiency, and I think everybody knows innovation as well. You know, security is not on there, but really all of those values in this mission statement really point to security. It's almost synonymous with safety, but they're 2 different things, as Gene pointed out. And I really wanted to thank Gene. Gene is our TSA representative, like he is at Omnitrans, and Gene has been a tremendous resource from the federal government. And really, he had a reoccurring theme about partnerships. In my 30 years in law enforcement, now 3 years in the transit industry, dealing with law enforcement and security issues, there is no other region in this country that works as well as the federal, the local, the state, and the county law enforcement partners. And when it comes to what Gene was talking about, critical infrastructure, we need to constantly remind ourselves, whether it's at the national or local level, we are operating in a critical infrastructure. That's by design. The Department of Homeland Security identified 16 of them. So that, to me, raises the sense of urgency on keeping this topic of security and keeping people safe really at the top. So today, what I'm going to try to do is hone in on some of the weeds, the specific things that we're seeing, and I'm sure Omnitrans and many transit agencies in this country are seeing when it comes to crime and disorder. Then I'm going to touch on our code of conduct that we recently adopted. Omnitrans has one as well. And then I'm going to briefly touch on this layered response to some of the issues that we'll point out. In addition to all of this, I'm also going to highlight a repeat offender that we've seen on our system that other transit agencies have seen in creative ways that we've identified in addressing some of these ongoing concerns. Next slide, please. So this is fiscal year 23. Some of the things we're trying to do is really capture crime data. It's challenging to do when you operate within the county of Los Angeles, different parts of it, patrolled by different substations of the Sheriff's Department, as well as 23 other individual law enforcement agencies. So we really try to look at some of the things that are affecting ridership: biohazards, driver assaults, fights on buses, and vandalisms. And this is a snapshot of our operating environment and what we saw in fiscal year 23, which is from July to June. You can see the vandalisms, fights on bus, but one of the things that, since I've been here in the last 3 years, is this uptick in driver assaults. Now the FTA is zeroing in on this even more. They proposed a new general rule directive on how transit agencies need to address this. Hopefully today I'll be able to touch on some of the things that we're doing to mitigate these things. But if you go to the next slide, this hones into the second quarter of this current fiscal year. And you'll see the same issues, but you'll see that we're trending on an upward basis. We're probably going to pass the driver assault number in this current fiscal year that we're in now. The number 21 from last year, half of those were committed by one offender, if you can believe that. And that's the case study that I'm going to zero in on today. to kind of go through the level of criminal behavior by this one offender. So if you took this one offender out of the equation, that number would go 50% less. If then you looked at the other assaults, what we're finding and what's not a surprise is de-escalation works. Bus operators using de-escalation techniques actually works. We could have lowered that number. Our contractors are, of course, our providers for the operations and maintenance of our system, if de-escalation techniques were used. So that's another layer that I'll get into in a little bit. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the code of conduct. So our executive board adopted this in 2023. California Penal Code 640, I'll get into that in just a little bit, but it really is the state penal code section that governs conduct on transit specifically. So our policy, like the one at Omnitrans, like many, it's to maintain a customer code of conduct. It also governs the behavior of people, not only exclusively on buses, but also at our infrastructure. So next slide, please. So unlike Gene, I'm not going to define every one of these sections here in the penal code, or I'm not going to get into the weeds or use a lot of acronyms, but you do see 640 of the penal code that has been an established penal code in the state of California for years. If you read that penal code section, it governs behavior on transit. You would think with that section and the proper application of it, our systems would be safer or more secure. That's not a reality, right? Law enforcement enforcing these sections all the time is unrealistic, especially in transit. A lot of times these crimes take place in a matter of seconds. The offender's gone. There's little information to work with, and it's very hard to follow up and hold somebody accountable. Next slide, please. So this is a Be on the Lookout or BOLO bulletin that we've implemented at Foothill Transit in the last maybe year and a half. Every time a crime occurs on our system, a violent crime, a driver assault, we debrief it with our contractors within 24 hours. We watch the video, we look at trends, the contractors look at issues. For instance, did our operator de-escalate the situation? Could this have been avoided? We look at it from a standpoint of who is the offender? How can we work with law enforcement? How can we identify this person? How can we maintain an urgency because it's critical infrastructure to hold somebody accountable? This particular person is the case study that I'm going to go over briefly with everybody today. There's no sensitive information here. It's all public record. But this is an offender, if you can go to the next slide, who we started seeing behavior with in the summer of 2022. And it progressed, as you can see. Started with spitting on a bus operator in various parts of our jurisdiction. And then it escalated in March to grabbing the steering wheel, making threats. Eventually was arrested by Pomona Police Department on an unrelated case. In May, another incident of grabbing a steering wheel, then he went to brandishing a knife. And it was at this time we started asking ourselves and asking law enforcement, can you please go to the court system here in LA County and get a criminal restraining order against this person? And that was unrealistic in Los Angeles County for a number of reasons, which I won't get into today. But if you go to the next slide and you go through June of 23 into August, the behavior did not stop. So we started talking with our general counsel and our outside counsel, as well as the counsels of our two operations and maintenance contractor providers. There's a lot of attorneys involved, and we asked the question, if we cannot get a criminal restraining order against this person for this type of behavior, what can we do? And we experimented with going after this offender through a workplace violence restraining order, which is a civil restraining order. And we invested a lot of time and a lot of hours and a lot of collaboration and cooperation. And we wrote an affidavit. Please go to the next slide. And we actually were successful. It took months to put this together. It took months to work with ourselves and our contractors to get to the LA County Superior Court, file a temporary restraining order, which was granted. We have to serve this repeat offender with that temporary restraining order, which was a challenge. And we could probably spend a good hour on how we did that, but we won't get into the weeds there. This person was served, ultimately had a court date in Whittier Superior Court here in Los Angeles in front of a Superior Court judge where I testified on this behavior this one offender was having on our system. And this LA County Superior Court judge granted a 3-year permanent restraining order. Ultimately, and around the same time, criminal charges were filed on this repeat offender, thankfully. 16 felony counts for her behavior, and she currently is in LA County Jail awaiting her arraignment. When she gets out, the challenge is going to be how are we going to enforce this restraining order? And then it also asks the question, how are we going to enforce all of these other code of conduct requirements that we have on our system? And that's really what the practical application of all of this comes down to. How do we do this? We have laws, we have a code of conduct administrative process, but how do we actually work with our contractors to actually make this effective? So go to the next slide, please. So again, we serve this offender with a temporary restraining order, then the permanent. We have numerous conversations with our district attorney's office. We looked at best practices and operational impacts of the code of conduct. How do we enforce the code of conduct? How will we enforce this restraining order if and when this offender gets out? And then we have, Gene touched on it, the Security and Emergency Preparedness Planning Team, which includes Gene and includes our law enforcement partners to really brainstorm and figure out ways that we can make this the best possible procedural guide for the contractors who are doing the work every day. Next slide, please. So like Omnitrans, I'm sure when they implemented their code of conduct, we looked at multiple policies. We looked at Omnitrans. We worked with Gene and TSA. We worked with our supplemental law provider, which is the LA County Sheriff's Department. Again, we looked at best practices and again, the Security and Emergency Preparedness Planning Team. Next slide, please. So when we implemented this, we built another layer of what we're currently doing with law enforcement, and that is using security to help us enforce the code of conduct. We contract law with LA County Sheriff's Department, security with Garda Security. And we spent many hours with our contractors looking at clear procedures and expectations and how we expect contractors to enforce this code of conduct. We developed a 5D approach to mitigating crime, specifically bus operator assaults on our system, and that's to de-escalate. That's number one. To ensure that victims of crimes desire prosecution, that's really up to the victim, but when it comes to the contractors, we want them to understand what that means when a law enforcement agency responds and talks to victims and asks the question, do you want this person prosecuted? Because quite frankly, we saw cases where bus operators were assaulted and didn't want to deal with it because they didn't want to lose time away from their work. They didn't really know what it was. So we're really trying to educate what that means. We want everything documented. We want to demystify the criminal justice system in Los Angeles County because there is a gap of trust in this county when it comes to being a victim of a crime and what that means and how complicated it can be. And then last but not least, the LASD is the Sheriff's Department, the deputies. We want our contractors and our customers to understand that the law enforcement presence on the bus is, or at our transit centers, is a customer service, forward-facing, community policing approach to keeping the system safe. It's not an occupying force. It's one that's there so the operators can do their job and so people can get to and from work or school, because transit is in a very short time is not a nice thing to have. It's needed for many people. And I think as a governmental agency, we owe it to them to do whatever we need to do to communicate and to build that trust with law enforcement. especially in the last 4 years when that trust has been a big issue nationwide. So when we added Garda recently, the security component, we strategically looked at our entire system and said, okay, if we're going to have a security to supplement law enforcement, where would the best place be for them? So we looked at our statistics, we looked at where things were occurring, and we decided that for 7 days a week, we were going to assign 2 transit security guards wearing that vest that you see here at our El Monte station, which is really the middle of our operating area. And these 2 uniformed security guards are there for the similar customer service, code of conduct enforcers, and they work from 10 p.m. to 6:30 in the morning, 7 days a week. They're at El Monte Station, and they collaborate with the Sheriff's Department who's there. They also collaborate with LA Metro, who has security there as well. So this security approach is layered, and it's also imperative that we connect with our other partners that we operate with, including Omnitrans. And I think in the future, there is, if we end up moving this transit security code of conduct strategy, because we've talked about Montclair Station, we already have the deputies at Pomona, but I think there's an opportunity there for Foothill Transit and Omnitrans to maybe collaborate when it comes to utilizing something similar. Next slide, please. Again, implementation, we actually came up with this notice of suspension as an administrative citation. We cannot emphasize this de-escalation enough with our contractors. And I'll get into that briefly in a couple slides. This layered approach to security, the layer does include Gene and TSA at a much higher level from the federal government. We cannot work at these issues. They're so challenging from a local level if we're not keeping our federal partners up to date on what's going on. And Gene is probably sick and tired of all the emails that I send him because there's a lot of BOLO bulletins and there's a lot of information that we share with Gene for the obvious. We want to collaborate. You saw all the resources that TSA can provide. There's definitely a connectivity to the higher national level to the local level. Ongoing training is imperative that we hold our contractors accountable for that training. And then we have this 14-page procedural guide that deals with this code of conduct and how to practically apply it from a bus operator perspective. And that is a work in progress, very challenging. Last but not least, this use of the Be on the Lookout bulletins. It's a way to educate and to keep an operating picture or situational awareness perspective from all levels of our organization, other transit agencies, and law enforcement. Next slide, please. So again, this is a snapshot of the layered security approach. This is another way we've communicated with law enforcement and with our contractors. We onboarded the Garda security guards at the end of January of this year. And we spent about 3 hours, myself and Roberta Estrella, our safety compliance coordinator, who's on this call as well. And I got to give kudos to Roberto. We took our contractor, security contractor, our law enforcement contractor, we sat down in a room and we really explained to the security company, Garda, what the intent of this approach to enforcing the code of conduct really is. And again, we stressed a lot of customer service. We explained what our brand is and what this code of conduct is and how we really want to use it to the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. These guards are unarmed, but again, they're a layered approach. So between those hours, we want them to interact with the bus operators. They walk onto the bus, they ask if everything's okay. If there's problems on the bus, they try to mitigate that. But the post orders are very specific, and the post orders were a collaborative effort between us and the security contractor. Next slide, please. Again, this slide, I just wanted to highlight the Sheriff's Department as our main law provider for Foothill Transit. We have bus riding teams. We have them at stationary locations like the Pomona Transit Center. We also utilize their mental evaluation team, which when it comes to responsible policing or 21st century policing, there's a lot of folks in transit or in our communities in general that need help. So we actually utilize those teams to go out and look for those people and offer them resources, offer them connectivity to housing. That's worked. As you know, it's very challenging to get people to accept the services. Nonetheless, we utilize these specially trained deputies to do that. We also ask the deputies to visit the yards, and we've also recently started last year. The deputies on this mental evaluation team actually teach a 4-hour de-escalation block to the bus operators. We feel that, again, that's the probably the number one mitigator on avoiding a lot of this. Some of these crimes are unavoidable, unfortunately, but many are avoidable if using proper de-escalation. So we've really doubled our efforts with our contractors, and we want this to be a sustained program. And the best part about it is the sheriff's department, law enforcement teach the class. They come to the class dressed in normal civilian clothes. They talk to the operators and the contractors, and they explain to them why they're on our buses, why we pay them to do what we do. And we want, again, to build that trust with law enforcement. I firmly believe in order for our system to get better in general, we need to continually build deposits of trust with our riders, with our contractors, and law enforcement. And I think there's many other ways we can do that and highlight that consistently with our marketing teams. So far, that's proven to be pretty effective, well received by the contractors, and we want to continue this program well into the future. Next slide. Okay, there's only a couple slides left, and I'm just going to pivot to some of the security, physical security that we're doing, not necessarily on the buses, but at our infrastructure. Because Gene talked about infrastructure. I saw the survey touched on cyber, and then there's the daily operational, keeping our people safe. We recently, in the last couple years, have been using eCam Secure, which, by the way, I mentioned Garda. Garda and eCam are under the same corporation. eCam Secure, we have our downtown layover at 17th and Grand in downtown LA, where every day there's maybe 15 to 20 buses underneath the 110 freeway. At night, that parking lot is empty. So we went to this security approach, which is using technology, artificial intelligence, geofencing in the evening hours where we don't have a physical security guard there. During the day when the buses are there, we have a physical guard. At night, we transition to these mobile cameras and set up a geofence and artificial intelligence. And the eCam report on the left highlights a specific case where one early morning, the artificial intelligence noticed a fire at that downtown layover. There were no buses in the area, but it immediately went to a live monitoring station in Long Beach. They immediately used a voice down feature and told this person to get off our property. The fire had already started. The person left. The security guard, physical guard, was then summoned, who ran and put out the fire. But it really shows how technology can really be used for risk management, risk mitigation. And the bulletin on the right is our administrative lot, where we have similar technology affixed to our fleet. And again, there was activity with somebody looking at our cars in the early morning hours. The remote monitoring station, artificial intelligence picked it up, called the West Covina Police Department, and we're able to use technology as a security force multiplier. The vision for us at Foothill Transit is to leverage this type of technology onto the buses at some point, because that technology is there where you can have your video camera set up with certain artificial intelligence to detect certain things that make sense. It could be gun detection. Some transit agencies are using that now, but we could also leverage it for remote monitoring to have an overwatch when things occur on the bus. And from a national level, when we're going to have high special events in our region, it all makes more sense to have this conversation than it ever has. So next slide. And this is the specific example that I mentioned. The remote monitoring detected the movement. They used the talk down feature. The guard uses a porta potty and put out the fire. And interestingly enough, where our downtown layover is located, it's about a few blocks from where there was a major fire in the city of Los Angeles that shut down one of our freeways. Again, our layover is directly underneath the 110 freeway. This type of technology works for risk mitigation without a doubt, especially in open spaces now more than ever. So I wanted to end with that. If you go to the next slide. I wanted to end with that just to touch a little bit on the layered security at our infrastructure level to protect our assets. But again, I can't thank Gene, Omnitrans, the collaboration that I've experienced in the transit world in this region has been second to none. The leadership from our CEO, Dorn Barnes, in creating an urgency and the need for this has been exceptional. And I applaud us for doing that, and Omnitrans the same. But we need to continue to build that trust with our ridership and with law enforcement. And I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, John. Really interesting. Again, this is a whole new world for me. I don't do security work generally, but as a professor in public administration, it's great to see sort of all these interworkings and then really thinking about 21st century, policing and what does it mean to keep communities secure. With that, we'll go to our third poll before we invite up our team from Cal State San Bernardino. And so what is the most effective way to deter criminal activity on surface transportation? Increased police or security enforcement on buses and trains, just something that we just saw from John's presentation. Stricter punishment for offenders, enhanced federal government involvement and resources. And this one, we gave an other. And if you answer other, we do have an expectation that you'll let us know what that other is. So increased security and enforcement, 63%. So really thinking about having security on the buses. Oh, and 21% other. Anybody in the other category willing to share?
So I think that we have a problem in this country of using the police and punishments rather than identifying what the root causes are and fixing those. So I think other is identifying why we're seeing a spike in assaults on the buses, and if there's anything that we or some of our partners can do to kind of mitigate that rather than relying on the police and and stricter punishment, because unless you are willing to get way down into the North Korea style stuff, we're never going to stop it with punishments or police. So
all right, thank you. And we have a comment. Leslie, please.
Hi, good morning. Leslie Trainer, Cal State San Bernardino and faculty fellow at the Leonard Transportation Center. I should have raised my hand faster because then I could have gotten credit for the exact same thing that the gentleman just said. But my thought is uncovering the root cause, uncovering the root causes of what's going on. Is it mental health issues that need to be addressed? Is it homelessness? Is it poverty and somebody is hungry? So that's the reason why I chose other.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Yeah, as someone who teaches public policy, that's one of the main things, right? We have to find out what our true problems are. And it's difficult in today's world, which is why in the policy world, we always talk about wicked problems and super wicked problems. And because now they become super wicked. They're not just wicked anymore. I'd like to welcome up our team from Cal State San Bernardino. And the leader of that team is Dr. Nerea Marteche Solans. And then we have 3 students who are going to be presenting a project that they finished last semester, working with Omnitrans and Foothill Transit. And so it's a really innovative way to get the next generation of workers out there really thinking about these critical issues that are impacting our society. And I'll just quickly, we have Raquel Guerrero, Lorraine Lopez, and Isabel Cervantes speaking with us today. And so I welcome you all up. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good morning. And I mean, we agreed I would provide like a 30-second introduction, and then I'm going to sit down. I'm going to let the presenters present. But I wanted to thank Dr. Collins and the Learner Transportation Center for having us today and giving us the opportunity to present the excellent work that the students have done. The context I want to provide is the work that they are going to be presenting. They did in a class that's called Preventing Crime in Transportation Systems. So I'm a professor at the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Cal State San Bernardino. And the students who are presenting today, they are students of criminal justice and crime analysis. So in that is a service learning course where we partner with organizations, and we've been partnering with Omnitrans and Foothill Transit. I have to also acknowledge Jeremiah Bryant, Dylan Firth, at Omnitrans, and Just Landis and John Curley at Foothill Transit. Because the way that course works is that we invite them into the classroom at the beginning of the semester, and we ask them what's going on. So what problems of crime and disorder are your agencies experiencing, and that you would like us to work on. And then throughout the semester, they provide information. They are available to talk to the students. We invite them in the middle of the semester to, touch base with the students. And then we invite them back into the classroom, and students present to them possible solutions to the crime issues that they had mentioned to us. So this is what you're going to see. This is the presentation that this group of students did to our partners. And it's a wonderful way to get actual practical experience and application of what we learn in school, but actually in real life. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to invite the students to present the work they've been working on. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lorraine. I know my hair color is not the same in that photo, but I am Lorraine. So we will be presenting on female passengers and microaggressions on public transportation. Next slide, please. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll be providing an overview of crime on public transit. Then we'll move on towards women's safety on Omnitrans and end our presentation talking about our proposed safety initiatives and the implications of those initiatives. The objective of our study was to actually analyze and understand the fears and acts of microaggressions that occur towards women on public transportation. So in providing an overview of crime on public transit, one of the key topics we looked at was fear of crime and the perceived fear of crime that women have when riding public transportation or when attempting to ride public transportation. Because of this perceived fear of crime and the perceived fear of becoming a victim of a crime, it has negatively impacted ridership. Now, in our study, the specific crime we focus on are microaggression crimes that can include nonverbal harassment, verbal harassment, or physical harassment. Examples of that are stalking, catcalling, or even brushing against women.
So from there, we believe that crime could happen at any time and anywhere. So our main focus obviously is the bus ride, but we like to believe that it happens before the bus ride, so on the bus stops, during their journey in the buses, and after, once they get off the buses. This creates fear for many women, especially if they're like parents. It creates them not to want to go on the buses, and it usually increases due to previous crime experience, culture they practice, age, and race.
So for our methodology, we focused on three main ways on analyzing and understanding our issue. The first way is through looking at the 2020 to 2022 Omnitrans perception of safety surveys. We also created our own observational tool questionnaire that was inspired by the LA Metro study, Understanding How Women Travel. With this questionnaire, my group went on an Omnitrans journey. It is our first time riding the bus. So some details regarding that is that on Tuesday from 1 to 4 p.m., we rode the SBX Green Line bus. Originally, there was 6 of us. And with that, we also had created a transit journey script, which talks about details regarding the journey a woman takes when attempting to ride the bus. Here's an example of how that observational tool questionnaire ended up looking like. We focused on 3 main topics, which was social observations, neighborhoods, and experience. So here's a close-up about the social observations. For social observation, we focus more on passenger interaction as well as seating arrangements and how many passengers were on the bus. Neighborhoods and experience is our own experience with riding the bus. And some questions that we included were, at any point did you feel any feelings of uneasiness or uncertainty when moving towards different neighborhoods? Or at any point did you feel uncomfortable because of other passengers?
So like Lorraine said before, this was our first time using the buses. We were blessed that we have cars. And so when we got on, we got some experience, but we did not get full-time experience like the people that use it a lot to go back and forth from school and work. So we decided to create a script focusing on the journey for passengers. And on the side of that, so if you guys see, this 1 through 6 is the journey, and then on the side, it's the fears that may appear in their minds when they are traveling. Okay, so steps 1 through 3 is before the bus. Step 1 is basically creating or figuring out the route they're going to choose, and there's nothing really going on there. You're at home, you're still safe, nothing's going on in their mind. But then we move on to entering setting. So it's from leaving their house and going to the bus stop. Depending on the types of neighborhood they live in or the type of time, it could create a whole bunch of different types of fears. If it's at night and it's in a rough neighborhood, of course they're going to be afraid, and especially if the bus stop is pretty far. And then the bus wait. We were lucky that we didn't have to wait a long time at the bus stop. We only waited no more than 15 minutes, and that was great for us. But we learned that there's some people that have to wait at least an hour. And depending on the time and the area, it could be rough, and they could bring a lot of high alerts. Steps 4 through 5, experience in the bus. So the transit arrival, the bus gets there, you hop on, you got to figure out where you're gonna sit. Depending on the time, like if it's peak hour, it could be very busy. There's gonna be people in and out of the buses. You have to figure out where you're gonna sit. And there's a lot of times where people may not want to be comfortable sitting with other people, especially if people are making them uncomfortable or staring at them. So there's that. That's the type of fear and alerts that they're going to be looking around. The next thing is transit journey, depending on the ride. So there's going to be people on and off. There's bus stops, of course. That's obvious. We're all aware of that. So then they just bring out a lot of high alerts that people are in and off. They see homeless people wandering around the bus stops trying to get on, and that could create another type of high alert. And then the last step is step 6, which is basically getting off the bus. Of course, we want to say that once you get off the bus, that's the end of their journey, but reality, it's not true. The bus could only get so close to their final destination. So a lot of times, some types of fear that could appear is someone hopping off the same time as them and proceeding to follow them towards the end of their journey. And that is it.
So based off the findings from the Omnitrans 2020-2022 Perceptions of Safety Survey, there was a higher percentage of positive perception towards feelings of safety and security while on the bus in comparison to waiting for the bus. And because of that, we wanted to look at what specifically is causing women to feel less safe while waiting in comparison to while being on the bus. So that leads to our observational tool questionnaire results. In our results, in the starting route, there wasn't that much of important key events that occurred. There was a 50-50 male to female ratio in terms of passengers, and the microaggression that our respondents had faced was only staring. For the return route, we noticed some distinct differences. For one, there was an increase of male passengers. Because of that, it did alert some of our respondents since the majority of us were females. It was also a rush hour period, which there was more activity happening during the intermissions of passengers getting off and on the bus, as well as approaching buses. And the same microaggression that was faced was staring. So because we took the SBX Green Line, it is a more advanced, I should say, in security enforcement in comparison to local buses. But something that was more important was the neighborhoods and social activity that really made us feel as feelings of uneasiness or alertness when riding the bus. It was specifically when approaching buses and knowing that there was an increase of social activity that heightened our fears a little bit. Another issue was the experience of riding the buses. Since none of us have ever ridden the bus, we were already nervous. And when approaching neighborhoods, most of us live in this area, so we are aware of the type of neighborhoods we're getting into, and that had also increased our level of alertness as well.
All right. So key takeaways that we got from our own journey. Noticed the first one is that there was a lot of security in the bus itself. We saw that there was cameras. There's usually a security. Noticed that there is a security guard outside, or they help the bus drivers help out the passengers when they're struggling to get their ticket. But we didn't really notice much security outside the bus. So on the bus stops when we're waiting, it usually looks a little rough, or we were lucky we were at Cal State San Bernardino. So that was the one that we noticed that was more secure compared to the other bus stops that look like they're more by themselves and away from everyone else. So that's one. The majority ride alone. We really saw a lot of people just getting on, doing their own thing, not really families. Rarely there's children nowadays. And of course, like Lorraine said, there's more men going on the bus. And then the most common form of microaggression that we've experienced, one of our own group members experienced this was staring. So she experienced a lot of staring during her journey. Someone kept looking at her. And then the key factor in the development of fear, alert, and uneasiness is social activity.
All right. Well, if you guys haven't already grasped, the core of our project is trying to enhance passenger safety, and we're trying to attempt that by combating gender-based violences and at the same time combat some vulnerabilities in the fear of crime that women can feel, especially as a passenger on transportation systems. After we did our observational tool study and months of research, we actually found out that there was 3 major response systems or implementations that we feel Omnitrans could benefit from. And for the sake of this project, our responses are going to pertain directly to Omnitrans. So that first is a real-time GPS response system. The main objective of this is to enhance passenger safety by allowing them to feel like they can report concerns, problems, and at the same time be the eyes and ears of a multi-dimensional company that's already hard to manage on its own. As well, with the idea that you have the chance to make a response and quick, and it has an accurate GPS location system, it could be done discreetly or non-discreetly, something similar to alert, see something, say something. I'll go into a little bit more about what that is. But the main purpose of this is that we want to be able to add in, or I guess eliminate the feeling of being helplessness and vulnerable when you are going to make your journey on the Omnitrans. And even before you even make it to the bus, you know that you do have the opportunity to be helped immediately, especially if it's just staring or something that makes you uncomfortable. Our major inspirations that we drew from was alerts, see something and say something. This is a cloud-based reporting software that, as mentioned before, allows passengers to be the eyes and ears of their transportation systems and report any concerns that they see, whether it be suspicious activity or actual crimes, from stalking to harassment, physical assault. We feel as if not only as all implementations need, there's going to be onboard training, there's going to be software updates, and a lot of other teams that do need to be involved in updating this software. But we do feel like by adding alerts to the drivers and potentially surrounding law enforcement and any other securities that happen to be at the bus stops, as mentioned before, by alerting them and keeping in connection with the bus drivers and also allowing passengers to know that they are being helped and real-time response and immediately, that we feel that this would be a major benefit to the app. Also, this is just a little example of like what the See Something, Say Something platform does look like. I also was taking away some ideas from the Life Alerts Help on the Go. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as much as we do love the idea of a discrete response, it does kind of feel nice to have a little bit of an alarm. I don't know if you guys are familiar with alarms that go off and you can pull a pin. I love those. But that is just an example of how we could add software. And there is other softwares as well, but added into the Omnitrans existing app. Next slide. Another way that we feel could raise awareness about this new software being added and also eliminate some of the vulnerabilities, as I mentioned before, of being helplessness and under the possible potential of harassment environment. We feel like with anti-harassment campaigns that contain a QR code, as well as like some information about what behaviors are considered intolerable, what behaviors will be alerted immediately. And I have an example I'll show after this, but the whole point of this is to raise awareness that behaviors are going to be monitored 24/7. And if you do see something and you need to say something, here's a QR code and it directly will take you there. And it'll give some steps on how you can do reporting as well. Next slide, please. So some key elements that we would get from these posters, like I mentioned before, this would be a good example without a bullet point of what behaviors are considered harassment. This could just be something more straightforward. Harassment behaviors are monitored 24/7 and will be reported to authorities. Another idea could be possibly just listing what behaviors from stalking to sexual assault and let people know that all of these behaviors will be monitored accordingly. That's going to release some vulnerability and helplessness, like I mentioned before, and also allow everyone riding the bus to be aware that this is what's not tolerated, and if this happens to you, you will be helped. Also, one of my favorites, I feel, is something similar to what you would hear at amusement parks. So the whole premise of this is to help passengers who feel like they're in distress or they're unfamiliar with their surroundings. Through our research, we found that many passengers, if they feel like they're in an unsafe environment, they're quick to get on a bus and kind of just get away from that place as soon as possible. And that can sometimes lead them to not be aware of where they're going, what bus route they're on, and not be familiar with any of the people around them or their surroundings. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we're familiar with San Bernardino. But the main thing that I really want to push with this helpful announcement for passenger safety is highlighting the Omnitrans commitment to passenger safety. I want to make sure that we can allow them to know that, like, again, that not only do we have these harassment posters placed around, but I want people to vocally hear that this bus is under harassment prevention watch 24/7 and all actions will be monitored accordingly. I feel like that would, personally, if I heard something like that on the bus, I would feel like there's eyes and ears all around, so nobody better mess around. And so I that would just make me feel a little bit safe. Next slide. If you guys wanted to read this with me, this would be a good example announcement of what I feel we could put on the buses. And we could even put these at the bus stops as well to allow others to feel. But here we go. Good day, passengers. Welcome aboard bus. This vehicle is headed towards destination and will make frequent stops along the way. As you prepare to board, we would like to remind you that Omnitrans is committed to making sure you are safe and well on each trip. We would like to kindly remind you to be respectful to the people in your area and ensure your actions are done to improve everyone's experience. Thank you for using Omnitrans and have a wonderful day. I feel like the main purpose of this, not to seem like it's corny like Disneyland, I don't want that to be something at all. I just want people to feel like they're in an environment that is safe, welcoming, and they are under the watch of a dedicated company that does care about their safety and enhancing their trip. Thank you.
We do have a written portion of this whole presentation as well. So if you wish to get access to that or have any other questions, please be free to contact me as well. Okay. Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to be part of something that benefits the community. This is our baby to us. And so we really liked it. Thank you, guys.
All right, that was great. Again, really seeing from that high up coming all the way down to the ground in real life experiences. And I'm sure many of us have all had those feelings of insecurity in our moving on in transit or other types of shared mobility. All right, for our last, just to kind of get you thinking before we ask questions and have our conversation. Pretty simple. How safe is transit in the Inland Empire? Very safe, safe, unsafe, very unsafe. Pretty simple. And our response is 82%. It's safe. So we're thinking that it's pretty good out there. That's good to hear, right? As opposed to, the other options there. And no one said very unsafe. So, okay. With that, I'd like to open it up for any kind of questions, discussion. I think we have a comment here.
I do have a question for Jean. So, that question that was at the beginning, the poll, kind of what was it, the first poll, like what role should federal government play? I would love to hear your take on that one.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to see the results of that myself. Because you always have that saying, "Hi, I'm from the federal government and we're here to help," and that's like terrible news. No, I thought in some ways that was great. I think there's no one agency that has the solutions to everything. Everybody's understaffed. Everybody's, doesn't have the budget that they need. So, you heard it from John when we talked about partnerships, that I think they're absolutely critical. So, so I kind of view my role sometimes as a facilitator. And so if the answer or capability doesn't lie within TSA, I'm willing to go do the legwork to go and kind of find that resource for the transit agency. I think one of the options on that first question was about money, and that's something I do not come with a checkbook. We provide free training and free resources, but there are transit security grant funds that are made available, but that's not administered by TSA. That's administered by FEMA. Now, as part of the application process through that, FEMA will ask the transit agency, have you engaged with TSA to have like one of those assessments, a base assessment done? But and you just get into so many different jurisdictional issues, between local law enforcement, the federal air marshals, there's everybody again has limited resources. So I really believe while yes, the federal government is big and we do have a wide reach, I think the ability to make sure a variety of agencies are engaged in tackling some of these issues, I think that's probably the best approach. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thanks for that. We have another question from Leslie. Tom?
Thank you. My question is for the 3 CSUSB students, Isabel, Lorraine, and I'm so sorry I didn't catch the name of the third student. But I wanted to let you know, first of all, that I really enjoyed your presentation and I love the passion that I feel coming from you. Love it. So I actually have 2 questions. My first one is, I noticed on an earlier slide, there was a reference to environmental indignity. And that sounds fabulous to me, but I'm wondering exactly what is the definition of environmental indignity? And then I can ask my second question in a moment.
Environmental dignity was not one of our, that actually probably shouldn't have been on the slide. That wasn't our one of our key takes on that slide. It was more about verbal, nonverbal, and physical harassment. Those were like the 3 main points we wanted to touch on, not necessarily that first definition.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so the second question I had was when you went into your findings and you found that the main issue was the main microaggression was staring. I'm just wondering if that was based on your personal observations being on the bus yourselves, or whether you surveyed other women on the bus and got information and input from them, or was it both?
So we didn't survey anyone, or that questionnaire tool was based on our own experience riding that bus that day. And the staring is, we noticed that when looking at passengers and looking how they're interacting with one another, as well as us as the respondents, we also felt the staring happening towards us as well.
I see. That's great. Thank you so much for explaining that, and well done again.
I think that what our group had meant by this was in some areas of San Bernardino where we had saw, we felt like there was encouragement for drug use, and just there wasn't very much care. In like some certain bus stops, they were like a little bit messy. It seemed like they were just kind of like hangout spots, and this made us feel like this wasn't like an actual, like nobody was caring about the environment of this bus stop. They were like, well, we placed it here and that happened. This is very rare that we felt that though, which is probably why I think that we had a little bit of confusion. I noticed for a fact that I have lived here all my life, but I have noticed that I did get a little bit more uncomfortable around like Baseline and Waterman, I'll say, in San Bernardino, if you are familiar with San Bernardino. But I think that what we meant by that, that there are just some areas that we saw that could benefit from just an environmental upgrade and some beautifying, I guess, is what we could also say, for lack of more professional.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very valid point.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's thinking about bringing in other agencies, right? So who has the jurisdiction over the bus stops themselves? And I don't know the answer to that. It might partly be some city property, it might be some county, or it
That-
might also be part of the transit. I think we have a response to that,
Well,
Jeremiah.
that was actually part of the class, which is the multi-jurisdictional issues. We have 2,300 bus stops. We own one. So again, a lot of partnerships, but I think that I'll come back to the Cal State section in a second, but to the partnerships, I wanted to go to ask John Curley a question, first a comment and then a question. So I thought what you were doing in El Monte with adding security and Garda and having, in addition to the police, having security makes a lot of sense. We are looking at doing the same thing in the Fontana Transit Center. As you know, that's one of the ones that we have a greater level of difficulty with. We actually have an item going to a committee tomorrow, board next month, and to city council in the next few days to sort of mimic that program with adding additional security that we would be paying for there. To the comment you made about Montclair, we are actively looking to partner with the city of Montclair. So if there's a chance you want to have a partnership and have a conversation about what we can do together with the city, let's touch base after this, just because there's something going on there right now. And then the second question, or the question is, when you talked about the LA Metro has instead of using the arms or the security guards like that, have really implemented their ambassador program that has been at LA Metro and a couple other transit agencies. Has Foothill looked at implementing an ambassador program or chosen to use paid security for other purposes?
Yeah, great comments, Jeremiah. It's great to see you. Great to hear from you. And as far as your first comment, 100%, would love to. That's why I sort of brought it up. I'm glad you're in the audience. So I think we should have a conversation because right now it's a test case at El Monte, but we do see that either expanding or moving. We want to be flexible with it. So let's talk about that. As far as the ambassadors, Foothill Transit has decided to go with transit security. At the end of the day, they look like security. We want them working with law enforcement as that supplemental addition to law enforcement. But we want to call them security. We want to give them the ability to at least be the point of contact for security related issues / code of conduct related issues. So we strategically decided transit security versus ambassadors. The ambassador program at LA Metro is depends who you talk to on its effectiveness. I think it's going to be a program. I talk to Chief Osborne all the time. I think it's going to be a program that's not going anywhere. I think personally it's a nice to have program. It's a great customer service forward facing program. But we believe you can get that same effect with the right post orders with security.
Thank you. I mean, I think we're evaluating the ambassador program here as well. We did get a grant that allows us to look at that, so it's something we will be moving forward to. But quite frankly, we know we need to take both approaches, and I was just curious how you decided which path to take. Because again, so we know we all face basically the same challenges and are working to address the implement the same type of solutions. To the Cal State students, as I mentioned when you presented a class, I thought you guys did an amazing job. I thought again. There are I think one of the things to call out from the class is there were multiple presentations. This is one that stood out the most, but again, I thought the class just did an amazing job providing feedback. It's the second year we've partnered, or second semester we've partnered on this class, and I think it's just a great testament to the partnership between multiple organizations. I think the thing that was really special about your presentation is in the recommendations. I think the things you presented were actionable. I mean, I think they're things that if we'd have to discuss, but are things that would be very easy-ish to do instead of just there's other things that are very, very pie in the sky. So I really wanted to thank you for sort of taking that approach and giving us things we could do. The other thing I wanted to ask you is since you said for each of you it was your first bus ride, you mentioned you saw microaggressions, et cetera. Generally, how did you feel on that first bus ride? I mean, how would you rate the bus ride? How would you rate it for safety? How would you rate it for convenience and things like that?
Hello? Awesome. Well, my name is Raquel, by the way. So if you guys didn't hear my name is Raquel. So I haven't been on the buses here, but out like I'm from Orange County as well. I've been out in the buses there, felt safe. Here, it was pretty fun. I'm used to San Bernardino since I work for the city. It was very fun. It was fast. You guys get to your destination very quickly, and I love that. You guys were on top of it, except for the fact that I saw an old lady almost roll down with her little cart, but it was fun.
I think growing up in San Bernardino, I know my parents always tell me that in the certain neighborhoods I should not approach. But when going on this bus ride and going on the bus for the very first time, I felt like, yeah, the neighborhoods don't look well, but the bus, taking the bus is very easy and you're just going to your destination as long as you're like in a way minding your own business and you let other passengers do their thing. It's very convenient and it's safer than I would have thought it would ever be.
I just think the bus got a bad rap. Honestly, I think that as soon as my first bus ride, I was like, what? I was just sitting there so excited, like, we're on the way. Like, I didn't feel, unfortunately, there was an old man staring at me, but maybe he couldn't even see. Like, it was like, I wasn't like, I was like, he was just looking. And then and all of the environmental indignities and things like that, or things that we feel were alarming or like where we were alerted, it was because of people far from the bus stop, like way from the bus stop. You just see them out and you're like, wow, where are they going? And then we just wrote it down. But when I really thought about it at the end of the ride, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this way more because gas is expensive. And this was really fun. And yeah, Raquel's right. The bus goes fast. But you don't notice. You're just like having the great time. I really liked it.
I just wanted to comment to the Cal State San Bernardino students. You guys did a phenomenal job on your presentation. And what we did in the survey there is kind of what we look at outside, where we as transit professionals or people who ride transit, we look at as being safe as 80%, but that isn't so much the perception out there of the general riding public. And it was probably the perception you guys had before you get on it. And it shows the big challenge we have as transit agencies to get people to at least try transit, to realize the safety and convenience of it, where we see it as 80% safe because we know all the safety and security stuff we put in, but you guys did a phenomenal job on your presentation. Thank you.
Well, that's part of, I think, some of the issues when we look at the perception of safety versus the realities of safety. And I know that's something that partly what I think our students are trying to say is just through a couple simple steps, you create a perception of safety when before it's the exact same conditions. So people just, get that idea. So I have a question. This is something that's in the news lately, and I'm sure some of you saw this. And I experience it when I'm sure we all experience it when we travel, going through now many of the transit or transportation security checkpoints that we go through, and the use of AI and I'm not sure if I understood, John, if I could just get a clear. Does the computer call the police departments, or does the AI that's recognizing that there's a threat through the camera, is it alerting somebody? How exactly does that work?
It's a great question, and it is a little bit technical, and I know I was trying to finish on time. So the cameras have the ability to capture certain behaviors. Right now, there's the ability that we don't have this yet. There is the ability out there to capture gun detection, a firearm detection, where the technology within the camera, if it sees movement and it sees the image of a firearm on somebody's person, specifically brandished in someone's hand, there is the ability now that the computer would pick up on that, would immediately notify a remote monitoring station, which is monitored by human beings, who would actually look at that video in a live picture and verify if it is in fact a firearm. If it is, there would be protocols on and GPS locations on where the bus is, and it would prompt a response from law enforcement. We don't have that technology deployed yet. I think in the future on transit, I think it's going to be deployed more commonly. I think some agencies are testing it right now, to be honest with you. What we're using right now is using the technology to pick up motion only on our property. And if motion of a human being or a car is picked up, that's when it triggers an alarm to, again, a remote monitoring station who looks at the live picture, then presses a button and actually says in a live voice, "This is private property, critical infrastructure owned by Foothill Transit, get off the property." 9 times out of 10, people hear that and they leave, especially at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. If they don't leave, it again triggers a set of protocols. Call security first. If security can't come, call the local law enforcement. So it is great technology. I think putting that technology on a bus to detect other behaviors, whether it's firearm detection or picking up a fight or a disturbance, I think you have to be very strategic in how you roll something like that out to the public, to your riders, to contractors, etc. So hopefully that answered.
Yeah, that's great. So it kind of brings up again these questions of privacy versus security. That's one piece. And then the other, I won't call out the city that I live in, but the city that I live in has cameras and they have these things, but there's not, the personnel aren't there, right? So the activities happen or the calls come in to the dispatch, but there's a workforce issue. So I have 2 questions. One might be seen, I don't know how we want to put them in negative or positive, but one is really looking at sort of this balance between security and privacy. And then the other is any thoughts on workforce and issues that are coming about. And I'll open that up to Jean as well as John. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about it as well. So Jean, you want to?
If you want Gene to start, I can piggyback what our federal partners say. Or I can start. I don't care.
Jean's coming up.
Okay.
Hey, John, it's almost like if we're standing side by side here. Like
Yes.
we usually are. So a couple things. So from a manpower issue, yeah, there's a myriad of security cameras all over the place in different environments, and very few are actively monitored. And the attention or the amount of staffing that is required to keep somebody's attention on that particular, what are they looking at, the focus that's required, and then to be able to detect and assess, yeah, I've got a problem here. I mean, that manpower will never exist. So I think the artificial intelligence, the analytics piece, being able to layer onto security cameras is critical going forward, because there's too much data, there's too much information. So we need help. I mean, even on the cybersecurity side, there's just so much stuff happening. We can't process all that information. So we need good AI working for us to help identify problems and then bring that to the attention of a human that can then, like John explained, then, they'll confirm we got a problem and then notify appropriate authorities and then take some kind of action. So on that piece, John, anything else to add with that?
No, I think you're spot on. From the manpower side of things, we chose to contract this out. And it is a off-site remote monitoring station. That's a command center. It's 24/7. So, and again, we wanted to start this technology, through our obviously approval from our board that we're using this, but we're using it at a very, very minimum scale right now to look at our infrastructure, our assets. And it's a very common tool that's used in the private sector and government sector. A lot of really good best practices cases, but it is costly. It's not cheap to do this. And, I think if you're going to roll it out to that next level, to your question on the privacy issues, coming from a law enforcement background, being the chief of police where we rolled out the body worn cameras, or even this technology in our downtown area, one of the things we did was we had town hall meetings with our business owners and the community. We wanted them to be very aware of what we were doing and how we were using it, and really outlining in a transparent way that this wasn't Big Brother watching. This was using smart technology to leverage human resources from a better economy of scale standpoint. But I think that, and I mentioned it in my previous response, I think if we're going to do this on the buses, it will be imperative that we get approval from our board. We front front load this technology, explain it to our riders and contractors on how we're using it. So we can, again, build that trust with using technology in a smart way. I mean, the technology's there. It's not cheap, but it is the future.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance. When we start talking about, constitutional protections, this is an eternal conversation between security and my personal privacy and freedom to associate and all those things. So that is a give and take. There has to be balances. I think it's a topic that, as we're planning security systems and processes, that definitely need to be taken into consideration. And but yeah, there's definitely going to be ebbs and flows on that discussion back and forth. After a big event like 9/11, then we're way over, like, okay, no, we're highly focused on security. And then that big event, when we start getting some time separation from that, and then now, okay, well, we're not willing to give up so much of our privacy in favor of security. So it's definitely something that, like John mentioned, it's a part of the planning process and discussion, whether it's, record retention and what are we doing with all this video? How long is it being kept for? Who has access to it? Those are definitely some topics that get addressed.
Yeah, and if I could add one thing to what Gene just mentioned, LA Metro and myself, our agency, recently brought up the question, is it a good idea for bus operators to wear body-worn cameras? And LA Metro is in the early discussion stages. I'm not sure if they're going to test and evaluate it, but that's a question that we've asked our contractors to begin that conversation. What does that look like? That's a loaded question for many reasons, especially when your business model is leveraging contractors to do the work for you. But I think it's a question to be had, and if it's done properly, it could work. I'm not saying it would work, but I think that's a question that we're going to be hearing in the transit industry in the next couple of years.
So since we're talking about cameras and the whole thing, I think the question is, what is the purpose? So, I mean, you have cameras that are recording things that most of them are not being monitored. So if you want to find out what happened past, that's one thing. In terms of preventing things as a deterrent effect, that is a completely different question. So when you're talking about the ambassador program and the security, so what is the purpose? So is it the purpose to feel safe, or is it the purpose to actually deter crimes? Because each of these measures can have a different impact, and it depends on where you place the priority or what it is that you want to do. So in that sense, the question that was up there just before our presentation in terms of what do we need to do for safety, and there was that category other, I went with other. I do think that all of those matters, but there's the relationships with local communities, leveraging other types of informal guardianship, if you want, that's not necessarily having police and cameras. I mean, do we need them? Yes, absolutely. But there's a lot of, I think, untapped potential. One of the projects that we did was on Pomona Transit Center, and one of the things that the students suggested was having like a farmer's market and having like utilizing the facilities in a different way where you would attract more people who have a legitimate purpose to be there, and that itself can disincentivize the presence of people who have no reason to be there. So, I mean, I do think that everything has a place depending on what you want to use it for, being very clear what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, from just a camera, to me, from my perspective, has limited deterrent value in and of itself. If I'm a bad guy and I see the camera there, that's not necessarily stopping me from doing anything. It's that response piece. It's sometimes, like if you had a camera like covering an access control point, and to be granted entrance into this now secure space, well, then now I need to talk to somebody. They're seeing me through the camera. Well, then there's part of the prevention aspect, but from a deterrence perspective, I think cameras have little deterrent value. And I think what we find a lot of times cameras also has the recordings from them maybe help us after the fact. And whether that's in an investigation and or from a legal perspective, like I have on my personal vehicle, I have a dash cam, right? So that if I'm involved in a car accident, then I can say, hey, that wasn't my fault. This happened. And, I think too, if you have that, all this recordings, then, there's from a liability protection perspective, that could be another purpose of the recordings, but I'd say limited deterrent value just by themselves.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Gene just said. By themselves, yes, it's a crime solution versus a crime prevention, more of. But the way we're using it, at least at the downtown LA layover in that example with a fire, it's not only it's not only a camera, but it's using technology to identify criminal behavior. And in the case of that fire, if we didn't have that technology, the question would be how big that fire would have got. That's right next to a giant homeless encampment that this structure or this parking lot's right next to. And you wonder if that technology was underneath the 10 freeway where that fire destroyed the freeway for a period of weeks, if that could have been a prevention tool using the technology and the live human being remote monitoring part of it, which is like having a security guard.
Yeah, so it's always interesting to think about, and Gene kind of mentioned it. Hi, I'm from the federal government. I'm here to help. That really came with, the 1960s Great Society, when the federal government was trying to implement and create programs, and then just how it's devolved so much, and that need for the local, that need for, because as we just heard from Nerea, it's just this idea of everything is situational, and it's all based on what's happening locally there where the people are, and having that knowledge. And that's been the big change, again, if we've seen with governance and with how the system's working. And this great example and case study of intergovernmental management, if we put it into that framework of the federal government working with regional and state agencies, as well as working with some local agencies to get things done and really improve the security. And then thinking about, again, that perceptions versus the reality. So we have maybe one more minute for any other burning questions before we close out today's event.
Do drivers happen to wear any type of like safety, like a vest, or maybe like have any besides, because I know we're talking about body cams and like prevention measures, but what about like some type of gear that would prevent them, or I guess lessen the evils if they are attacked, and we can't like prevent them from being attacked? At least we can prevent how harmful they are attacked. Is there any type of like, is it just a uniform?
So the main thing that we have that would protect operators is on board. There's the driver barrier. So much like if you went to a bank, you often would go to a bank and they're behind glass.
Right.
The barrier is there
Mhm.
to protect your driver while they're driving.
Mhm.
The uniform itself does not have anything beyond that, but the barrier is the
Mhm.
primary.
Yeah, I just because I didn't even think about body cams, and then on that discussion I was like, what else do they wear? But that barrier is, I mean, besides as we heard, it has been broken before and they've been attacked, which is insane to me. Those barriers are like Tron, like they're like Transformers. I don't know how. I mean, I guess if you have a hammer, but I just wanted to know, like, if after that barrier, like what happens,
Yeah,
or
the barrier is the primary. And then
Yeah.
question for John related to that. Do your field soups have body cameras already, or is it no? Okay.
This has been a question, Jeremiah, in the last maybe month that
Okay.
was posed to me, and my eyes went almost to the top of my head.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. We are out of time. I do want to invite you to come to our next dialogue, which will be on April 16th. We'll be talking about equity and inclusivity in transportation funding. So how is funding going into communities, and how is it distributed? So really thinking about those. I mean, it's all great and people are a great resource, but we also need a little bit of financial resources to help us get things along. So we'll have that conversation. I hope you can all join us then. And again, I'd like to thank our speakers. Maybe one more round of applause if we can for everyone joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. And if you want to watch or rewatch or re-experience this whole thing, it will be posted on the LTC's website, and you'll be able to re-experience the event once again. So thank you. Have a great day. Be safe out there.